What's the latest, man? How are you?
I've been good. Just,
Yeah?
running the business, working hard. Family's good.
How did you get your start? Like when you think about how you built this business and what you wanted to do, where did you go to school?
I went to the University of Utah.
Okay, you went to the U.
I attended the University of Utah on a golf scholarship. I was really interested in playing golf competitively. I had some success in high school golf. I went to high school back east and wanted to serve an LDS mission, and that was kind of the best path for doing both.
Yeah.
Right.
How did the golf career work out?
It was great. I mean, I played. I didn't love it as much as you need to continue playing. I mean, you have to really love it.
Yeah.
And so I played. I enjoyed it, but I always knew when college ended that would be the end of the competitive golf days. And I still play for fun. It's great for business. And it's been fun to teach my kids. I've coached the high school teams for my daughter and son, and that's fun.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah, it's
Golf's
opened a lot of doors.
What I like about golf is like it's just you.
Yeah, it's you. Like there's no.
It's
I played all the other.
you from the end of time.
Right. I played all the other sports. There's no timeouts. There's no substitutes. It's you against the field, and you own every shot. You own every move.
Yeah.
You have to be totally present and living in the moment, and focused, and it's an ultimate test of mental toughness, physical ability, overcoming adversity, which inevitably comes. It's really a powerful game for how to live life. I've used a lot that I learned from a sports psychologist that we used when we were on the team in business and in life.
Really?
Yeah, a lot of it. For example, just being present in the moment. You can't worry about the shot you just hit, and you can't worry about the one that's upcoming. You can only worry about the moment you're in right now and controlling the controllables in that moment. I can't control if the wind blows. I can't control the lie. I can't control the stance. Mm-hmm. All I can control is the swing that I make in that moment, and just being present for it, not being upset about what just happened or excited about what just happened.
Yeah.
Just being really even keeled and being present. And I also learned too, like my coach used to say, I want to walk out and see you guys on the course, and I don't want to know if you're 5 under or 5 over by the way you're walking. The body language. I don't want to know what's happening. I don't want you wearing it.
Yeah.
I think that's a lesson in life. Like sometimes things are going well and we're performing well and we're happy about it, and we have to have that humility and be grounded and know that it can change and earn it every day.
Yeah.
And other times things don't go our way, and we have failures and losses and struggles, and we have to be resilient and have that same humility and be grounded. So I learned a lot about life from the game.
Why do you think golf is so hard?
It's just so technical. I mean, look, you're hitting this little teeny ball with this.
I know, but you
club head
hit. Obviously, you're way better than me at golf. By the way, I'm not good, but I played golf growing up and all that type of stuff, and sometimes play now, but I'm not good at it at all. I don't want to give off that impression. But like there's moments when I play, I'm like, holy shit, that was unbelievable.
Right.
Yeah. Like some sweet
moments of greatness.
That's
why you go back.
This is the greatest game ever, and I've figured it out. And then literally the very next shot, it's like, or it's like something crazy. You're like, gosh, I've figured nothing out.
It's like having kids. Most of the days are really hard, but then you have these like moments of brilliance, and then you have another one. So, but that's golf. It lures you back in. But I think it's challenging for people because it's such an individual game. Like, can I do better? Can I improve? Can I be more consistent? Can I hit that shot again? And I think truthfully too, it's people love being outside. It's just it's so great to be out with 3 of your friends. It's an intimate little group.
Absolutely.
You're in God's country. You're watching the birds, and it's sunny and warm, and
that's the best part about
the phone's in the bag. Hopefully.
That's
you won't play well if it's not. And I think there's a lot of elements to it, but it's a tough game.
Yeah, it's an impossible. Yeah,
there's just so many variables.
Game. It's the very hardest game I can think of.
Yeah.
What did you study at the U?
I studied marketing and Russian. I was a double major.
What?
So I served my
Those
mission.
Are so random.
I know. So I went to I was a business undergrad student, and at that time there was 4 different majors you could declare inside that, and marketing. Because marketing and sales was really where I was most passionate.
Sure. Yeah.
So marketing was that. I'm talking to all the schools about having more sales programs.
Yeah.
Because I think that's a huge missed opportunity.
Weber State has a great sales program.
I know, don't you love it?
Yeah, Weber State's good. I don't know if anyone else does, or if they do. I don't know.
Not that I'm aware of, but I also knew Weber State did. Yeah. But so I did the marketing, and then when I served my LDS mission in Ukraine, I naturally became a Russian speaker because we were some of the first missionaries there, and we were in the urban areas where they predominantly speak Russian. The rural areas in the western part of the country was more Ukrainian. So I learned Russian. When I came back, the University of Utah had a new Russian program. And I wouldn't say they begged, but they were like, hey, we have this new program, why don't you come and take advantage of it? And so I was able to be a double major. I didn't want to give up the business degree, but I loved the Bachelor of Arts and learning the language. And I loved reading the history and the culture, and the Russian poets and authors are just incredible. They're musicians, their ballets, their symphonies. I mean,
the greatest writers come from there.
A lot of oppression.
Yeah.
And a lot of really tough times.
That helps for writers.
Yeah. And I'm really glad I did, Clint, because now with the situation in Ukraine and the relationship with Russia, I can lean and fall back on a lot of things that I read and studied, you know.
Were you in the region where Russia's trying to take over right now?
Correct, yeah. So I was called to the Ukraine-Kiev mission. Actually, I was called the Austria-Vienna East mission, and it said I would labor in Russia. But I ended up in the Ukraine. It ended up being the Ukraine-Kiev mission, which covered all of Ukraine. And I spent a year almost in Crimea.
Okay.
And also in areas where there's definitely been conflict.
Yeah.
And that's been hard to watch for sure for me, because I know the people. I've walked those streets.
For sure.
It's been heartbreaking for me.
Like he took Crimea in 2014, right? And now whatever. What's your assessment of this thing? As somebody who's been there, understands this, majored in Russian, which I didn't even know, but now I want to talk about the Ukraine and Russian conflict with you. Like, what is your take on this? Because, when it first started, it was like, Putin's bad. This is terrible. Let's all send all of our money. Let's all update our profile pics to Ukrainian flags, things like that. Great. Right. It's kind of cool when we can rally together around anything, honestly, it kind of shows that we can still lock arms sometimes. And now it's started to become what are we doing? Almost.
Yeah. Well, I mean, first of all, it's centuries of this Russian oppression on Ukraine. Ukraine's the breadbasket of the former Soviet Union. It's a vital piece of land to Russia. And when you think about Russia, too, they don't have a southern port. Right. I mean, imagine the United States with no southern port. You don't really think about the geography of Russia.
Right.
And so when Ukraine broke away, the Black Sea represents, access to the Mediterranean and obviously to global waters. And so they wanted Crimea primarily because Sevastopol is home of the Black Sea Fleet. That was the Soviet fleet, but naturally Russia saw it as theirs, but it's in Ukrainian territory. So Crimea, rather, is a very strategic piece of ground for Russia. So it didn't surprise me that they went after that. Obviously, didn't love the way they did it, but fortunately, not a lot of people were killed. Not as many as we're seeing now. There were definitely some, and I don't want to minimize that. But now you're seeing an emboldened Putin who wants more, who feels more emboldened, who is following the tradition of previous czars. And Russian dictators, where they just take what they want and they do it at massive human cost. They do it without any regard for humanitarian sympathy. Women and children bombing apartment buildings, blowing up grain silos. It's just a zero-sum game. It's a winner-take-all mentality. And then you see all the Russian troops that are dying. These are young children that are not even sure what they're fighting for. You have parents and people in Russia that are not sure. They're carefully trying to protest, but how do you do that in that country? So it's a very complex problem, and I see both sides of it. I see the side of Americans who are like, hey, our cities are falling apart, our schools aren't working as well, we're not the superpower we once were, our munitions are low, what are we doing? I see that perspective. And then I also see the perspective of people who say you can't allow Putin to just go on a tear in Eastern Europe and just let him do whatever he wants. And so I really do see both sides of the equation. And I think, as it sounds so political, Clint, but I think as in most things, the way I see them, I think both people are right. I really do. I think there's common ground for both. And I hope we can find leaders who can do their best to find that. Okay, we don't want to be the world's policeman. We can't afford to be. Sometimes it doesn't work. I mean, there's a lot of examples of that.
It's never worked in my lifetime.
Right. And then, but then how do you watch? And I have a conflict of interest on this one, truthfully.
Sure, yeah.
Like, I love these people.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, they fed me.
Of course.
They've kept me warm.
If you spend 2 years somewhere, how could you not?
Yeah, I love these people. So I am so, I've walked these streets, but I do think we need, looking past Ukraine, we need a clear foreign policy direction in this country of what our boundaries are and what they are not, and what we're going to do in certain instances. It's not sustainable for us to be the world's policeman and to jump into every conflict and to try to mediate these conflicts. But then you have to balance that other side where I say both right of how do you protect the dignity of human life and how do you not help somebody when you can?
Yeah, I'm probably simplifying this. Like when I said, like, hey, we've never been right in my lifetime, like Iraq War.
No, I understand.
All like all that type of stuff where it's like, whoa. But so I'm probably simplifying it when I say, like the last war where we were like clearly the good guys was like World War II.
Right, but aren't you glad there's not American boots on the ground there? Like,
oh yeah,
that would change.
That's what I'm worried about.
That would change everything for me.
Yeah,
right. That would, and so
by the way, who won World War II? Soviet Union.
Yeah. Well, when you think about,
it's pretty crazy.
Yeah, you think about what happened and how it all played out.
I mean, we played a big role in it, sure, but like Soviet Union, they lost tons of people, and like, they took the brunt of all of that. That was crazy.
They did, and Hitler's miscalculation of going that direction, right? And winter and what he would face, and
Anyway, back to like
crazy
today.
History. Yep.
Yeah, like how do we get out of this? Because you said like, hey, it'd be great to have leaders who see both sides of this. Doesn't seem like we do.
Well, I think it's like I'm a businessman.
Yeah.
I'm not a politician. I've been involved politically, but that's what I loved about me as a candidate or me as an operative is that I don't see it politically. I see it practically. And I think in a business venture, you have to have a clear reason why you're doing something. You have to have an entrance strategy, and you have to have key performance indicators that determine whether what you're doing is working or not around your predefined goal. And then you have to have an exit strategy. How are we going to wrap this up and move to the next project, sell the company, keep the company, whatever your end game is. And I just sometimes feel like in government, there's no entrance strategy. There's no predefined goals. There are no key performance indicators, or they're ignored. And then there's absolutely no exit strategy. So whether it's this conflict, whether it's anything else the government does, they never close programs. They never shut them down. They never shrink the size of anything. So the minute you allow them to do something, it's permanent. Yeah. They're never going to contract. There's no exit strategy. And then they just kick the can on issues because they all want to get reelected. Yeah. And so I think I think we need more business people, truthfully. And that's why I ran for governor. Yeah. And you have to have people that understand how to do this and how to execute. And I know what everybody says. I know, politics isn't business. It doesn't work. But those are the politicians talking because they don't know how to do it. Yeah. And it does work, and it could work. And there are examples
there's politics
of it.
in business too. Like, I hate when people say like these are two completely different things. Well,
I mean that has to frustrate you. I mean, look at all these talented people in the Silicon Slopes. None of them are running for public office. Imagine what it would look like if some of our best citizens ran and were elected. Imagine what.
But why would they? Well, like we should get into your gubernatorial run. Like, what you did is like literally brave and courageous. Like, I think it's incredible when somebody puts themselves out there into the public sphere and says, hey, I'm going to go up against X, like an establishment, like two establishment candidates in your case with John Huntsman, Spencer Cox, who was the sitting lieutenant governor. Right. And like, hey, I don't think we should just hand this to either of these two people. And like, let's start a different conversation. Like that's so impressive to me. Like, and you ask, like, why doesn't it happen more out of our community? I don't think we're not built for that. Like this idea, not that we don't have the courage or all that type of stuff, because all of that clearly exists with like taking risks and building big companies and things like that. But this whole idea of like just getting pilloried day in and day out and stepping into the public arena, and there's like, it's totally thankless. And it's just, like that is a different concept than entrepreneurship where like, if you're being successful, you can see your company grow.
Yeah, it is
successful in politics.
It is different.
It actually seems like it's way worse.
Part of the hurt of my loss, a big part of it was, man, is this going to discourage other people like me from running?
Yeah.
You know, like, did I not rise to this occasion well enough to inspire others who are outsiders to get in? Because if they looked at my race, they'd go, yeah, that's, that case in point on why I don't want to do it, right?
Well, what could you have done? You didn't know COVID was going to happen, and COVID changed that whole campaign.
If you look at the race just in a nutshell, and look, everybody has a reason why they lost, right? And but if you really break it down and dissect it, and I did a 60-page post-mortem on it just for my own peace of mind and learning and, you know, just being a student of life. You know, I got in the race and I picked a lieutenant governor who I believed in that would help me in the convention. Well, when COVID hit, there was no convention. It was all over Zoom with delegates that were elected, you know, 2 years earlier. So I worked for years to have relationships in the party. I was chairman of the Salt Lake County Republican Party, twice elected chairman of the Utah Republican Party, had all these relationships, and I didn't get a caucus meeting to have my people go get elected.
Yeah.
That hurt. And so then, you know, that changed the dynamics at the convention. And then truthfully, the biggest one was I had a premonition and good intel that John Huntsman would not get the signatures. He had to get on the ballot through signatures. We all know he wasn't going to pass through the convention.
Yeah.
And I respect him for trying. And he didn't get the signatures, if you remember. But
No,
because
I don't remember
COVID
that.
hit the week before, he got Governor Herbert to give him a emergency stay that he would have an extension and he could do it digitally. So we had all done it door to door and got it done. Then COVID hit, and then his poorly run campaign on this one issue, in my opinion, he was able to get an extension because of COVID and gather signatures through banner ads and, you know, digitally, where we all had to do it door to door. And so at that point, the race really changed. But imagine that race if COVID doesn't hit and John Huntsman doesn't get the signatures.
Yeah.
You know, so look, it's just like anything else. You can come up with a million reasons why it didn't work out. I don't regret running. I loved it. I lost. I own that. I'm proud of that in some weird way. I wish it was different for sure. But it's just like any other game. You know, the inches, the foot that was barely out, the ball that got popped out inexplicably, and it changes the dynamic of the game. And that is the game.
I mean, yeah, like, and I bet if John were sitting here right now, it'd be like, man, I was up by like 10, 12 points in the polls and COVID hits and I have to stay home and the lieutenant governor is on TV every day.
Right. That was a huge break for him. Yeah.
Like that's
what it takes to win.
Yeah.
You know, he got the breaks.
That's politics.
Huntsman didn't. I didn't.
Yeah.
I personally think other candidates got the break with COVID because they could migrate to the hard right on talking points related to COVID when there was a lot of unknowns.
Yeah.
And, you know, so it was just, you know, hey, man, that's the game, right? It's like business. You know, it looked perfect on paper. The back of the napkin looked perfect.
Yeah.
And it was a good strategy. There was a path to victory for me. I definitely wasn't the favorite, but there was. And the game changed. And that's the beauty of life, Clay.
Yeah.
You just got to love it, man.
Yeah.
You know, we're not going to be here that long, so you just got to embrace all the madness because it's so fun, right? It's so great.
That's true. What were you? So let's talk about the business you built first. So you get out of University of Utah.
Yeah.
What do you start doing?
Well, I got out and I tried to. I moved to California. I lived in California for a year, where I met my wife. But we came back to Utah because it's where we wanted to raise our family, and I just love Utah. I do. I love the seasons. I love the outdoor lifestyle. I just love the people. The politics. I mean, just there's a lot of reasons.
Yeah.
But we came back, and I did a bunch of different things. But I always was in or around the real estate sector, and I tried commercial real estate and was successful and had a good venture in that. But I always migrated toward the residential. I just loved it. I felt it was intimate. It was connected to people's lives. There was more velocity. The commercial transactions were a little fewer and farther between, and the residential was more, it was a brisker pace. And I thought there was more opportunity for me in residential. I felt like the commercial was more competitive at the time, and that residential lacked certain things that I could bring to reshape and reinvent the industry. And so I just saw more of an opportunity. I felt more attracted to it. And so that's where I ended up. So I became a real estate agent and was selling residential real estate for 3 or 4 years and had the opportunity to get involved with Sotheby's International Realty when the brand wanted to come to the state of Utah. Huge brand. Such a gift.
Yeah.
It really is. And it taught me that luxury isn't a price point. Luxury is an experience. And you can have a luxury experience at any price point. And that's part of what I wanted to redefine about the residential industry. And so I got involved in, I migrated from selling, which was really important because I understood it from the agent's perspective. I had been one, understood the challenges, understood the opportunities. I understood what brokerages weren't providing that agents wanted. And there's a whole spectrum of brokerage options for agents. And I wanted to be the luxury one. And again, luxury not being a price point, but an experience. A brokerage where agents could get support, marketing support, transaction support, where they could grow their business. We'd help them with business planning. We'd help them organize their contact management plans. We'd get good software and train them on it. And they didn't have to be the jack of all trades and masters of none. And there's a lot of agents to do that, and they're successful, and that's another approach. And it's not wrong. It's just not ours.
Sure.
But I wanted to redefine that. And that meant that we were going to charge a little bit higher split than our competitors because we were doing more. And I thought that there was agents out there that would want that would see that the split wasn't an expense, but they'd view it as an investment to grow their business.
Right.
But then we really had to step up as a leadership team with our support staff and really provide services. And it was great because the homies came on the scene and they were like, hey man, why would you pay a realtor? I still see the billboards and I kind of chuckle. And there's a market for that probably.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of people out there that want to pay, but they want a great experience and they want to know that they got more in the transaction because they paid a real estate professional, that it wasn't an expense, that their home sold for more, it sold more quickly, and that they got better service. And that's what I love about the industry. Just like any other industry, there's a spectrum of service providers and pricing, and I love that competition. It makes everybody better.
What was your sense for Homey when they first came out?
I had seen that model so many times before in the history of the industry. Truthfully, people would say they were kind of a disruptor. I just didn't see it like that. And I told people early on that we're thinking of either investing or we're a part of it. And I want to be respectful of them.
Sure.
What they tried to do, it's a part of our industry. We need those types of players, but they weren't disrupting. That had been done many, many times before, going all the way back into the 60s and 70s. And it doesn't usually work because you can't sustain a business model on that kind of revenue. And you just can't. And there's certain reasons that are probably too in the weeds and too nichey for this program, but happy to talk to anyone about it anytime. But you just can't go head to head with the traditional model and try to provide the same services and then not get the same revenue or similar or close enough revenue.
Yeah.
And I also didn't like it truthfully because they were attacking a lot of real estate agents saying that they were overpaid.
That was a big piece early on.
Yeah, and making the insinuation that they were somehow either lazy, unqualified, and they have the right to do that. You just asked me what I thought. I personally didn't like it. But that's because I'm protective of my people. I know how hard they work.
Yeah.
I know how much they put into it. I know how much they care about their clients. I know how much they make for their clients more than just throwing it on the MLS at some low price and thinking you saved money, but you actually lost money in the transaction because you priced it incorrectly. So I'm defensive of them because they're my people.
Yeah,
but,
of course.
But not defensive in a way where I don't think Homey should compete. But those are kind of some of my...
Homey being in the game, I think, has been really interesting for the whole market. It would have had to have been, right? Like, when I think of Homey, I think a really good strategy that they had is when they started getting into mortgages.
Yeah,
that
and
made
title.
Sense.
Yeah, so this is interesting. You probably don't know this, but Utah had an affiliated business statute that was more strict of a regulation than RESPA. Okay, RESPA is the federal law that it basically prohibits real estate practitioners from steering people to their mortgage and title companies. So like you're doing a real estate transaction with me, like, hey, you need to use my mortgage company, right? Yeah. You got to give them options. You got to let them have options. You can't steer basically. And Utah had a law that was more stringent than that, more strict.
Wow.
So in 2019, I think it was, I led the effort with a couple other people in their brokerage community to change that law because I'm like, hey, we're a red state. We should be able to compete. I should be able to own it if I properly disclose it and I'm not steering people, then I should be able to do it. And I went around to the brokerages and said, hey, we should all team up and see if we can change the statute. Homey declined to participate in that.
Really?
In that collaboration, yes. And we changed the law successfully. And that very change of the law that we changed saved them. They'd be in my opinion, I think it would have been harder for them to survive had they not been able to sell ancillary services like mortgage and title. So yeah, 2019, you can look it up.
Fascinating.
It was a bill that was sponsored eliminating or modifying the affiliated business statute and allowing people that own brokerages to also own mortgage and title ventures.
Yeah. What's your sense for the housing market here in the state and this, houses anywhere in the state, particularly around the Wasatch Front? are so much money, like way more than, you know, like what do we do about this? How do we manage this growth? How do we manage, like, you know, there's a contingent of the state that's like, hey, let's just stop growing and, you know, just reverse it, which is not really even possible.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the data, people in Utah really kind of regret that we got discovered. But it's so funny because I go back to when we had the Olympics, and we really did have a little bit of an inferiority complex. Like, we wanted to show, like, we were here too, and we have a great place, and we're smart, and we can do this. And we had the Olympics, and that kind of lit the fuse, right, of the exposure that we got, that people were like, wow. And then you get to COVID, you know, you run that whole 20-year span. You get to COVID, and people want to work from home, and now it's, hey, where do I bike? Where do I, you know, I came into your show today, and, you know, the person that welcomed me said, yeah, I ride my bike 8 miles from Riverton. I mean, that's the lifestyle people want.
Yeah, for sure.
And so we've just totally been discovered. And I know most Utahns feel like we wish we could go back and change all that. We can't. And it's just going to continue. I see it in my business. But on price point, the affordable housing crisis is one of the reasons I ran for office. It's one of our biggest challenges, in my opinion.
Well, you understand it better than most.
Yeah. And, you know, I've written a series of op-eds for the Deseret News that people can go back and Google. It'll just come up under my name. But I think if you just Google Thomas Wright and housing, but I in there I outline a few of the things that we could do to fix it. And I'll just give you a couple. One is our zoning laws are very old and antiquated. I mean, we're operating on zoning laws that were created in Mapleton, for example. As an example, I'm not picking on Mapleton. I live in Mapleton. I love the 1 acre size.
It's cool that you picked Mapleton.
But do you know what I mean? Like, you go look at any municipality in the state of Utah, about 250 of them. Those zoning laws were primarily created in the 50s, 60s, maybe later. Think of how much our state and the world has changed since then.
Oh, yeah.
And we're stuck with these zoning laws. Now, when we talk about getting more density, we're not saying we want a high-rise apartment building in your backyard in Mapleton.
Sure.
Nobody's saying that, right? I drove down the I-15 core coming here today, and there's apartment buildings along the I-15 core. That's where you put high-density housing.
Yeah.
Right? There's proper places to put it. But if we don't change the zoning laws to allow it from like 3 per acre to 5 per acre, where, you know, people have a little bit smaller yards, but they still have them, then we're going to continue to have this affordable housing crisis, because a developer can only carry the land so long, paying the carrying costs of interest and taxes and the opportunity cost of having their capital tied up before they finally just acquiesce and say, okay, we got to build to what the zoning is. They're not going to change it. Because if you try to change zoning in any city, usually what happens is the vocal minority shows up, the NIMBYism of not in my backyard. You can do density, but you're not doing it here. I bought here because I didn't want that. The municipality next door should do it. I don't want it in Draper. Sandy should have it. Or, you know, Highland, that's not what we do in Highland. We do it in Alpine. You know, and everybody just kind of kicks the can around. And if you're an elected official and you're getting assailed in a city council meeting, of course, like, I mean, everybody has a moment where they're like, I'm listening to my constituents that showed up. I'm not going to change the zoning law. So zoning is a big, big problem, in my opinion. And for example, taking big box retailers that are now antiquated because of the Amazon era and the digital world that we live in, taking those and making high density housing, but sometimes they're not zoned for that. They're zoned commercial. Go try to change the zoning of a Best Buy, for example, from C1 commercial to, you know, high density multifamily, which is usually on a transit hub. It's usually on main arteries. It's the right place to do it. It has the space for parking. And no, it's zoned. That's what it is. And so it gets to a point for me about private property rights. Right? Like, there's got to be a proper role of government. But at the end of the day, how much should they play in creating these artificially high housing prices because of the dearth of supply? And that's what this is all about. The housing crisis is simple. It's boiled down to one thing: supply and demand. We have way too much demand. Utah's growing. It's been discovered. And we don't have enough supply. And so that drives prices up. And what it does, Clint, is it jams everybody where they are. And now with higher interest rates, they're really jammed because they can't sell. They can't afford the house they're in if they get the rates where they are today. So they're going to stay where they are, and that's great. But then when people aren't migrating in the housing market, you have 2 problems. You don't have any entry-level housing because those people are not moving up, and you have a missing middle. And that is really the problem. We have a missing middle stock. And when you don't have a middle, people don't go up the rungs of the ladder in housing, and they stay, and then the people below them also can't move up. It's like a traffic jam on the ladder. So you've got to have a good, healthy supply of all price points so people can climb up and down the ladder. People that are older and their kids are gone, they can move down if they want.
Yeah.
Right? People that are down, they're having more kids, they want to move up. Great. That's swap. But when you have these high interest rates and you have low supply, you jam people. And when you jam people, you artificially raise prices to the point where, they can't afford it. And here's the thing too, is when you have zoning laws that are like 3 per acre instead of 5 or 6, what happens? You get urban sprawl because you need more land. And when you have urban sprawl, what do you get? You get more inversion, you get poorer air quality, you have to build new schools, you have to build new roads, you have to build new water districts, you have to build new firehouses. And we're just making the same kind of errors that Phoenix and LA, those that kind of went before us with these growth models, have made. And you think we'd stop and try to learn, and we have in some cases, but we really, really need to address the zoning because at the end of the day, developers are going to develop what they can. It's a business.
Sure. They
need to make a margin. And that speaks to one last point, and that's impact fees. When you're a developer, which I want to make clear I'm not here advocating because I'm a developer. We're real estate professionals. We sell properties for people. But when you have these impact fees, so you go to develop some land in Mapleton, and let's say you get 10 acres and you can make 8 lots by the time you put in the roads. Sure. What is the impact of that to bring in the sewer and the water and the electrical, and what's the strain on the city? You should pay for that. And everybody agrees with that. But when let's say the true impact of that was, $160,000 or $20,000 per lot. But the city looks and says, well, we kind of have a deficit of revenue. We don't want to tell people we want to raise taxes. Who can we get to pay for this deficit? Oh, hey, I know. Developers make way too much money because developers have a bad rap. Real estate people get a bad rap.
Sure.
And so they say, hey, instead of charging them 25, let's charge them 40. We'll get the 160 on the impact, but then we'll get another 160 for this deferred maintenance program we have over here, and everybody will be a win. We don't have to raise taxes. But when you do that, guess who they pass it on to? The consumer.
Yeah.
They're not going to eat it and lose their profit.
Still their residents because
it's not a nonprofit. Yeah. They're going to pass it along.
Yeah.
So I would have liked to have seen, if I had been governor, I would have liked to have seen kind of a truth in impact fee movement. Like there's got to be a way to a clear algorithm, a clear process by which a municipality says, okay, here is the impact fee associated with your development. Yeah. And you should be able to see it, and there should be some guardrails around it, because I can tell you that there are places where developers just don't develop anymore because they know the municipality either won't approve it, they'll delay them, they'll charge them too much impact fees, or they're just too big of a pain. And so I believe in local government and local control, but I also think when needed, there needs to be some leadership at a state level to say, hey, how can we get together and create a master plan for Utah on zoning and impact fees so that we can put the high density stuff where it needs to be. We can improve zoning over here. We can get a missing middle inventory here. We get entry level over there, and let's work together. We need a leader that can bring all those municipalities together, and that is going to be a brutal conversation. Yeah, and start to have some leadership and discussion. We don't always have to agree, and we may walk out of the room not agreeing on anything, but at least we're having the conversation that starts working toward a plan that's good for all Utahns.
By the way, that's the most coherent answer I've ever heard on that question.
Oh, thanks, Glenn.
Like it's actually incredible how in depth you understand this. Why aren't you that leader that gets everybody in the room? Why doesn't Spencer call you up and say, hey, be the Utah's housing czar?
I don't know. I'm not serving in any capacity. So I just, he won. He's governor.
What's your relationship like
I've always said I'll support whoever wins, and I have, and I will. I want Utah to succeed. I don't want to be a sore loser. I'm not. I want him to succeed. I want the state to succeed. But I would love to serve in some capacity if I can make a difference in anything. I mean, under Governor Herbert, I was on the Utah Tech Board of Trustees. I was on the State Board of Regents over higher education. I've served in a lot of capacities, and just recently I was put on the Great Salt Lake Watershed board that's overseeing that $40 million to improve the water, the wetlands primarily, and the flows into the Great Salt Lake. And Speaker Wilson had put that together. So anyway, I would love to serve. I'm not trying to veil some message on your podcast.
No, of course not.
Spencer and his family are given a lot, and everybody does the best job they can do, and he's working hard. And if I can ever serve in any capacity and help Utahns afford housing, I'm all in.
Do you have a good relationship with him?
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, I think so.
That's cool.
Yeah. I mean, I used to talk to Governor Herbert regularly, texting, calling. I wouldn't say it's that close, but honestly, I think when you run against people, it is what it is, right? And
it's a human thing.
Yeah, and I have to give him the benefit of the doubt, because if I had won, what would I have done? So I'm not here to say, I'm the I would have been perfect, and so we all do what we do, and there's a lot of talented people in the state, and a lot of them are serving in a lot of great capacities. So if I ever get called upon, I'm happy to consider it and contribute.
I'm telling you, he should make you the housing czar, and if we don't have that position, he should make it up. But how do we get out of this problem outside of that? Do you think housing is our biggest problem?
It's not growth is our biggest challenge.
Yeah.
And so all of the issues related to growth are our biggest challenge. And I don't, problem is tough for me, but yes, I think it's our biggest challenge. Growth is the issue, because if we don't manage the growth well, it's coming. I'm from Utah. I've been here basically, other than a couple of years here and there. Do I wish we could all go back and drive up a little Cottonwood on a powder day and be there in 20 minutes? Yeah, yes, that would be awesome.
It's the whole plot of the show Yellowstone.
Right.
The whole plot is no, not in my backyard. That's the plot.
Right. So, there are challenges associated with growth, and that affects the Great Salt Lake. It affects air quality. It's affecting housing. It's affecting so many issues. And if we don't really get out ahead of it, then we're always managing it from behind. Then you're always behind. And government just has a tendency to wait till a problem hits them in the face, and then they jump and act like they're going to save the day, and they're on it. That's just what government does.
Yeah.
And maybe that's just the way it'll always be, but I'm not going to, I refuse to accept that. I think we should elect people that want to get out ahead of the problems. Look at the Great Salt Lake. The levels were declining for 20 or 30 years. We knew it. Everyone knew it. And you wait till it's at a critical low, and it's labeled by the New York Times of a quote by Joel Ferry that it's an environmental nuclear bomb. And that kind of set the whole thing off, no pun intended.
Sure.
The toxic dust and the low level.
Yeah.
And look at, then all of a sudden government jumps. And now we're on it, and that's good. That's great.
Yeah.
I'm glad we're on it. But why couldn't we have been on it 5 or 6 years ago?
Yeah.
Why couldn't we have been talking about, the use it or lose it policy, where some ag people were just flood irrigating fields they weren't growing anything on, because if they didn't use their water, they lost it.
Yeah.
Once we figured that out and we said, hey, you won't lose it, just let it flow to the Great Salt Lake. If you don't need it, don't use it. Why weren't we on that 5 or 6 years ago?
Yeah.
Why are we always just a little bit behind? In business, if you do that, you go out of business.
Yeah.
Or you suffer serious economic consequences, and you'll wish you were out of business. But in government, for whatever reason, it just doesn't happen.
No, it's a monopoly.
You wait till the problem is catastrophic, and then you jump and try to change it. And there's so many issues like that, like housing. It's not a catastrophe yet, but it will be. So what are we going to do about it?
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
With that, I think we're on the verge of something here that, again, we got to not repeat the same mistakes of a Silicon Valley or these Austin or whatever it is, these kind of and I don't know anybody who's done it completely right, but we should be able to do it. It seems like we also have a lot of land, up and down.
We do. But you know what's so interesting, and I learned this really front and center in my race for governor. 29 counties in the state of Utah, and a majority of the population lives in 5.
Yeah.
Washington County would be 1, but those 4 counties up and down the Wasatch Front, this is where all the population is. And that's a challenge for rural Utah, because there's important things going on out there. People's lives, they need things too. And we can't just say, hey, we're Wasatch Front only, but we've got to balance that. But at the end of the day, you'd think because the most of the challenges are finite in these 5 counties, they would be easier to solve. But in a lot of ways, I think it makes it harder.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Because it's so concentrated. So there's some challenges associated with that. But, I spend time in Park City, for example, and that traffic from Kimball Junction to the resorts now is LA style.
Traffic is crazy
there.
It's
bumper to bumper.
Traffic is crazy there. It's crazy in St. George.
Yeah, and what are we doing about it?
It's nuts.
What are we doing about it?
Yeah, it's absurd.
Are we going to wait till it's a 2-hour drive and then... and that's not to say that nothing isn't being done. We have a great director at UDOT. There's a lot of great things going on. So I'm not in here throwing bombs saying I could fix all the problems and they're not doing anything.
Sure.
I don't speak like that. But we've got to start creating solutions to a lot of these challenges, or they just build to a point where you're just stuck with them and they just become normal.
Yeah.
I had to move a lot of the support services for my company out of Park City to Sugar House because I just couldn't, in this labor market, I couldn't get employees to drive an hour and a half. I mean, it was an hour from Kimball Junction to downtown Park City, 1 hour.
That's crazy.
The ski traffic.
That's
not
crazy.
Utah. That's not the Utah way. That's not who we are. And it was all of an hour.
And
it's an hour out at the end of the ski season, end of the ski day. So you have to leave at 3 or 6. Otherwise, so we're managing our lifestyles now like we
I don't know how anybody
people do in
goes
LA.
skiing.
We don't want that in Utah.
Skiing is fun, great. I've lived in Utah my entire life. Been skiing like 3 or 4 times. Here's my challenge with skiing. You're just waiting all the time. For most of the time, you're in a line, or you're in traffic, or you're like it's not enough. I can't do it. It's
Come to the
too
top
much.
of the mountain with
I don't
me.
have the
Ski
patience.
the trees, Clint. I'll show you the way.
I don't know that I have. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know that I have
No,
the
I
patience
know.
for skiing.
I had some family come those blackout days between like Christmas and New Year's.
Oh yeah.
And they were all beginners because they were from Arizona. Oh, I'll teach my nieces and nephews how to ski. I'll be the nice, like good uncle. And we just decided at the end of that 3 or 4 days, like we can't ski holidays and blackout days. You're gonna have to come a weekend in late February. Do you know what I mean? Because it was just 45 minutes in a line, kids in boots that are uncomfortable standing in ski. It's just, you're right. But see, this is what I'm talking about. But these things are what made Utah the best state, the brightest star on the flag. And we have challenges that weren't created or they're nobody's fault, but they're there.
Yeah.
And let's put them all on the table. Let's get the best minds in our state to try to solve them. And let's be collaborative and let's try to knock some of them out because they compound. And when they compound, then it gets really difficult to solve.
Well, you're seeing like these glaring, flashing red lights, like warning, warning, warning. The ski thing is one of them. The housing thing is one of them. I mean, it takes 2 hours to even get inside Zions National Park. I mean, like all of these things are like warning. Something needs to happen here, or this is only going to get worse because the growth is not going to slow down.
Oh, I mean, the entrance at Springdale to Zion National Park has been an issue for how many years?
It's crazy.
I mean, it's to the point where.
By the way, I have no idea how you solve any of this, but this is.
Well, I know, but like that's the point, right? Like it's you got to love these challenges.
Yeah.
As a leader, you got to go, these are awesome challenges. All right, let's figure something out. It won't be perfect. Maybe not everybody will like it, but let's do it. Mm-hmm. But if the litmus test for politicians is their approval rating and getting reelected, then I can promise you one thing: none of them will get solved.
Yeah.
Because they're heavy lifts. And they're controversial, and sometimes they don't work out, just like in business. There's plenty of good CEOs that went in and tried things that didn't work, and they got fired for it.
Sure.
And they went on to have magnificent careers.
Sure.
So why are we so scared of failing? Like that's the question. I tell my kids all the time, like fail. That's the beauty of life. You know what I mean? Like it's good to fail. That's where all the learning happens. That's where all the good stuff happens. Yeah. So if you get elected to an office, man, like you're there, do it. Like
I've
what do you
always
have to
thought
lose?
that too. It's like you get in there. Seriously, what do you have to lose?
Right?
Like, why not do something cool rather than, and by the way, I love Spencer. Maybe he's doing this. Maybe he has all the plans for all this anyways. But I have always thought like, man, if you get in that office, just go all the out and just do what you think is right.
This is no time for maintenance.
And see what happens.
Right. But like, I remember Springdale, like 5-6 years ago, we were in Southern Utah. I took my wife and kids over there during a spring break. So, you can imagine what it was like. Yeah. And I had to drop them off and let them go on a little hike and just drive around because there was just nowhere to park. I spent 4 hours in my car. So, and there's plans, on the east side and Kanab and, there's some plans for an east entrance. And, I mean, it's in the works, right? So, again, I don't want to say, like, there's all these problems. Nobody's doing a thing. Yeah. That's not true. There's a lot being done. But I would like to see more results. I think we're judged at the end of the day by our results.
Yeah.
Not by the process and by the talking, but like, what did we get done?
What did you think of the gondola?
My take on the gondola is this. Like, I know there's a big controversy on the environmental side, back and forth. And I see both sides of the argument.
Which is what? Like,
hey, do you want to see the eyesore of a gondola in one of the most beautiful, majestic canyons in the world? And is that really the way? Or do we just keep the 2-lane road? Or, I get all those arguments. But here's what it is for me, Clint. Is it the best use of $300 million with all the challenges we have? Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm pragmatic. I'm a business person. This is what I would do in my business. Give me all the problems. Let's prioritize all the problems that we have. And let's put them all on a paper and let's prioritize them. We can't solve them all. No governor, no legislature, no person can do that. I want to be fair. No one. But we can look at the top 10 and say, okay, how are we going to knock some of these out?
Yeah.
And make it easier for the next group.
Yeah.
And I would look and I would say, is spending $300 million when our education system is one of the least effective? I mean, you can say those test scores are good, and they are, and I'm not assailing the whole system. But like, I look at the priorities of the state of Utah, and I don't know where $300 million for a gondola fits. So I'm not even getting into the environmental and the look and how to solve the problem, which is a problem.
Yeah. No, it's a problem, but is it a top 10 problem? That's an interesting.
Do you get what I'm saying? But isn't that what we do in our households?
Yeah.
Like, would we come home when we were, we had a bunch of problems and say, hey, I spent, $3,000 on this, and your wife or partner or whomever would say, well, wait, what about all these other things? Mm-hmm. Like, for me, it's just about prioritization. And I think what happens in politics is an issue comes up and it's a wedge issue, and we just talk about the issue isolated. Mm-hmm. And that's okay. But I also think it has to be talked about in a broader scheme. Like, where does it fit into the overall strategic plan? Because if you don't have one, then you'll just fall for anything that comes along.
Yeah.
You got to know, like, here is my agenda. Here is what we're accomplishing. And unless something comes up that falls into the top 10 immediately, and it happens,
sure,
COVID, 9/11, calamities happen. But unless something happens that really falls into the top 10, we are not going to get distracted by shiny objects or shiny problems or problems that people impose upon us. We're going to stick to the core mission. Mm-hmm. Now, the Cottonwood Canyon's not sustainable. It's a big tourism thing. I want to be fair with that too. But I'm not sure for me if that falls in. $300 million is a lot of money. Think what you could do with that on a lot of fronts.
Yeah, that's an interesting point.
And you just can't do everything. But that's what government leads us to believe. They didn't create any of the problems, which is false. And then they say, we can solve them all. And it's all with our money, right? Not theirs, it's ours.
Yeah.
And then we look and we're like, what are we getting for all this? And sometimes it just doesn't feel like that much.
Yeah. What do you think of the state of politics in the state of Utah right now in terms of like kind of the tone, the tenor, like the way politicians are interacting with each other? I see like on Twitter sometimes, like, it's kind of crazy. We have like these Democratic senators calling out,
it's a little hot.
It's hot. Why is it so hot? I think that's pretty new to Utah.
I think when you have a super majority like we've had since the late 60s, it's been 50 or so, 50 plus years of super control by one party. The last Democrat that won a statewide election was Jan Graham for Attorney General, which really isn't shouldn't be a partisan office. Probably should be governor appointed, but it's elected in the state of Utah. And that's not really partisan. So you have to go back to 1980 when Governor Matheson won re-election and so when you have this really extended period of time of one party control, I think what happens is two things. One, that super party feels a little invincible, and maybe rightfully so.
Sure. Like,
they're getting the mandate from the voters. This is what they like, and this is what they want. And that's a thing. But then the other thing is, I think people in the minority party then are like, hey, we got nothing to lose. The only way we're ever going to turn this is just to throw grenades and bombs. And you get frustrated. Like, I remember playing ping pong with somebody that was a lot better than me. And after you've lost 5 games in a row, you kind of start just hitting it as hard as you can. Yeah. You're like, well, maybe I can at least hit him if I can't beat him. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And so you just get it's just natural human reaction, right? But I don't think that's their path to a majority or to closer to a majority. Those kind of antics.
Again, I know nothing, and I don't belong to a party, so take all of this for what it's worth. But they seem like in total disarray, the Democratic Party. I mean, they didn't even put up a candidate against Mike Lee. Right?
Yeah, I think
that's weird.
Well, they bet all their eggs on Evan McMullen, right?
Who's a Republican? Like, it's very like.
But that was led by Ben McAdams, right? I mean, he really led the charge inside, and he has high credibility in that circle. He's in recent years somebody that's done better than probably anybody.
Ben McAdams,
with the Democratic Party.
Yeah,
and so he has high credibility. So I think when he said, hey, look, this is our best chance to defeat Senator Lee, I think the party, well, let's give it a try. And it didn't work. It didn't even come close. But maybe it was worth the experiment for them. I don't know. I mean, I'm not in those circles. I've been the Utah Republican Party chairman. and I've served on the RNC. I've been in those positions. I don't think either party has all the answers, by the way. And I'm disappointed by a lot of what the Republican Party does. But I just made a calculus a long time ago that if I didn't get in the game on one side or the other in a two-party system, I personally, and I respect the fact you're independent, I felt like I was a little irrelevant. I need to get in and fight.
I am irrelevant.
No, I don't know, because there's a lot of independence in the state and in the country, and I respect that. No, but I was just like, I'm not going to let.
If you want to have a voice, you do have to pick a side.
Right?
That's kind of interesting.
I don't know. But I mean, I don't. Yeah, I mean, the Republican Party has a lot of. I mean, the national debt's both parties' fault. I mean, President Trump blew that debt up. I mean, before that, we blame it on Obama, but now it's like, well, okay, but President Trump did the same thing. Yeah. So, like, I mean, I'm not one that's myopic and like sees it through rose color. And Democrats are right, wrong, and I'm right. Yeah. We have got to get to a place where we can talk. And forget about even the word compromise, because then people think you're compromising your values and your principles. But it's not about that. It's about getting together and going, okay, here are our top 10 problems. Here's number 1. What is it that we agree on it, and what are the things that we don't agree on? Great, we agree on 5 things. Let's do all those right now. And then let's fight about the other 5 and see who wins. And maybe nobody wins. And then let's go to the next problem. But like when you have huge problems like we have and challenges, there's so much common ground if you can articulate it and find it.
Yeah.
Right? Like there's so much common ground. It's not like we're down to the granular details of refining a system or a process. That's hard work. I've done that in business. I've done that in life. Right? Yeah. But like, when you haven't been working out and taking care of yourself, you can do 90% of the improvement with like 2 small tweaks.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? It's that last 10% that like is like, oh man, this is painful.
Yeah.
Right? I don't know if I can do this.
Yeah.
But we can't even do that. No. So it's great to talk about, civility and all that we need to talk about that. I'm glad when I see leaders talk about that. But we also need to find leaders that can sit down the warring factions and say, okay, there's got to be things that we agree on here. Yeah. Because you're an independent. One of my most proud moments of my life was when I was the Utah Republican Party chairman. I have a lifetime friendship with Jim DeBacchus, who was the Utah Democrat chairman. Yeah. We're very close, for personal friends. We don't agree on a lot politically, but we used to say on TV shows, if we sat down, we could solve probably 70, 80% of the problem. We agree on. Like Democrats don't want the country to be in a $31 trillion debt. Yeah. And neither do Republicans. But why do we let our elected officials do this? Yeah. Right? Like we agree on so many things, but what we do is we focus on those granular things we don't. And the politicians do it to us. They wedge us. Yeah. Because they want to raise money off of them. They want to divide us. Yeah. They rely on us being tribal so they can get elected. And we have got to be smarter and rise to the occasion and say, hey, I agree with this candidate more on the issue, so I'm going to vote for him or her. But at the end of the day, that person needs to be able to sit down and create a result. Yeah. We have to judge people by their results, not their efforts, not their tone, not style. Yeah. That's all great stuff. I love it. Yeah. Right? Sure. Like how many jazz teams have looked perfect on paper, but they didn't work. Yeah. And they said, hey, we got to blow this up and start over. You're right. You got to judge it by the result. I totally supported that. Like, right. Yeah. And there's a strategic plan. And you might not agree with it, but there's a plan. Yeah. You watch them. You know that they have a plan.
And they freaking care.
And they have experience and they care. Yeah. And you're like, hey, man, I'm a season ticket holder. I'm renewing. I believe in this. Yeah. That's what I'm talking about. And there are people that disagree. Why do we trade him? Why do we do that? But at the end of the day, they respect the fact that somebody has a steady hand on the wheel. There's a strategic plan and we're headed in the right direction. Yeah. Right? Even if it's not one I agree with. Yeah. Right? It's easier to accept at that point. But the political climate is so hot and it's starting to find its way into Utah because nothing is getting accomplished. Yeah. The public is getting more and more frustrated, more and more furious. Yeah. And the elected officials are just firing cheap shots at each other and wedging us on things that, quite frankly, don't really affect our lives. Right? And we let them do it.
That's fascinating. That's a fascinating point of view. Having gone through the gubernatorial race, what role do you think Utah's media plays in all of this? Like, how much of a role does the media play in kind of stoking this division?
Yeah, I think the media nationally is a different thing. Let's talk about Utah. Utah has a great media population. I had a good experience running with them. I found them to be fair and thorough. I think my observation of them, which I'm not a media person, so I'm giving you the outsider's perspective, but I had plenty written about me, so I think I have the right to say. I just think they're underfunded. I think the changing dynamics of streaming, the changing dynamics of advertising dollars going to more social and digital and going off of cable and network TV.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, my kids don't watch network TV. My 15, 16, I mean, it's Netflix, it's Hulu, it's very targeted. They know exactly what they want and they consume what they want.
Yeah.
And so I just think they're underfunded. I mean, look, the Salt Lake Tribune had to go to a nonprofit.
Yeah.
Luckily, we had a wealthy family in the state that wanted to take that on.
Yeah, I was on the inaugural board of the Salt Lake Tribune's nonprofit. Yeah.
And so, like, without that, it'd be gone.
Absolutely. Yeah, the Huntsman saved the Salt Lake Tribune.
Yeah,
no
and we owe them a debt of gratitude for that because it's an important part of the community.
Mm-hmm.
Even when they write things about you don't like, you have to acknowledge that it's important, right?
Yeah.
But the slant of media is a different thing that I could talk about. But just overall, my general observation is they're severely underfunded.
Yeah.
And so they can't dig when, a politician's making a decision. They can't send two investigative journalists to go really dig into it, to really find out what happened. They kind of just have to write a superficial story in 20 or 30 minutes and get it up online before somebody else does.
Yeah.
To get the advertising revenue online, to get the clickbait. And that's the reality. And so it's become a little, and I'm sure journalists would agree with you, that it's just become a little bit less thorough and a little bit, it's just happening too quickly to be thorough. It's not their fault.
Yeah.
They're capable of it. Like they are.
Oh,
I don't have anyone in the media in Utah where I would say that person was unfair or I didn't. I found them to be fair and doing a good job.
Yeah, I majored in journalism. But so I was like, yeah, journalists are really cool because you can hold people accountable and stuff. And it used to be able to do that. I think one of their challenges is they've just lost all credibility, as everyone has. Like any major institution in our country, for some reason, well, it starts in 2016.
Yeah.
Has lost all credibility, right? Yeah. And it's fascinating. And it's not his fault. He may just be the one pointing it out, and we're in an interesting spot. What do you think about nationally? He's definitely going to win Trump, the Republican nomination. At least it seems like it.
Yeah, I mean, if you looked at the numbers today, I mean, it seems like everything that comes out negative about him helps him.
I think you put him in jail. He's the next president.
Yeah, I
think that's how crazy.
I do think he'll be the nominee, and I've said that. There's a lot of people in the state that support Governor DeSantis, who the guy's created a lot of results. Like him, not like him, he's created some results in Florida, but it's just Donald Trump has a very strong base, and I saw it. I was on the RNC when he ran the first time, so I saw it up close and personal. And that base is not leaving Donald Trump. So
never. They will go.
Yeah, and so you look at the battleground states where the race will be decided. I think obviously it's getting to the point where it looks like it'll be a foregone conclusion he's the nominee. There's still a ton of time left, and anything can happen, right? Tons of time. But if it were held today, he would be. And then the question is, can he win a general election against the incumbent, President Biden? And it'll come down to those 500,000 voters in those 5 states, and so then you look at those numbers, and Biden has a little edge. The president has a little edge, but I think there's a couple red flags in there. Hispanics and black voters seem to be trending more toward Donald Trump. And that's probably economic. But with independents, the president is really strong, and independents sometimes create those outcomes in those swing states.
Yeah.
So people, voters like you, Clint, that are looking on both sides and are a little less partisan in the way they vote.
Yeah.
So it will be a fascinating election, and it will be. There's so many questions about President Trump, and there's a ton about President.
There's
former President Trump and
questions about President Biden. Does he know he's president? Is maybe the
start.
start.
I mean, and I had a dad that suffered from that, so it's so hard to watch. I had a dad that had early onset Alzheimer's, and passed away 10 years ago. It's just so hard to see that.
It's clearly happening. I mean, it happened to Reagan, the end of his, it's weird we can't talk about it. It's hey, our president is he forgets where he is.
The song the Beatles wrote out of the Bible, there's a seasons of life, there's a time for this and a time for that. I don't know why, and it happens in business, it happens in the private sector, it's not just politics, but why in politics can they just not let go?
They can't.
Did Tolkien nail it with Lord of the Rings?
Yeah.
They just cannot throw the ring into the the pit of fire, whatever, in Mordor, whatever.
Yeah.
They can't do it. They get right up to the edge. They want to. They know it's the right thing to do, and they get right there, and they can't.
Yeah, well,
they
we're
can't
run
do
by
it.
the oldest people.
Well, it's not even. Yeah, it's less. I know 70-year-olds that have a 20-year-old mindset, and I know 30-year-olds that act like they're 100.
That's exactly
so.
Right.
I mean, I don't want to disqualify anyone on it, right? Like, and I know you agree. Like, we don't want to be ageist in that sense. But the point is if when you've been in 6, 7 terms, you just constantly running. It's career politics. It's like, can't you ever let anyone else serve? Like, do you really think you're the only person that can do this? Like, I know if something happened to me tomorrow, somebody could run my business.
Yeah.
Then they would. Yeah. Somebody would rise up and run it.
Yeah.
Right? Would it be the way I did it? Probably not. It might be better.
Yeah.
And you just can't live your life thinking you're the only person that can do something. I think it's really dangerous. And I think we should all read those verses in the Bible of there's seasons, let them end.
Yeah.
Go out on top. Leave people wanting more. Be graceful.
Yeah.
Like, move on when it's time to move on. Right?
Yeah.
Like, I could have been the Republican Party chairman more times, but I wanted somebody else to serve.
Yeah.
You got to walk away.
Yeah, that's the hard part. We need term limits so bad.
I used to not be for it because I felt like voting was term limits. Like, but
it's not though, because.
But at this point, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, you get so much. It's such a huge advantage to be an incumbent that it's not really.
It is. Talking to a guy who found out the hard way.
Yeah, there's such an advantage to being an incumbent that it's like.
It is.
We need term
and
limits.
Americans all say, why can't we get new people? Why do we have these same people? And then you're a new person that runs and you don't have the name ID. COVID hits, you can't get your name ID up. And then the high name ID people win. Yeah. And there are people that are like, oh, you ran for governor? They don't even know. And like, they have the right to do that. That's their right. I'm not mad at them. I've had apathy in areas of my life. I'm not perfect, but then you're like, well, there was a new guy, like we could have made some progress. Like, and they're like, I wish I would have known. And you're like, what? Like, I did all that and you didn't know? Like, so like, I don't know. I'm much more careful in my voting now of looking at every single candidate on the ballot. And I take that much more personally than I did before.
That's interesting. That's cool. Yeah, John Huntsman, when he ran for president in 2012, was pushing term limits. A lot of what John Huntsman was pushing in 2012 is like, he was in the right space there.
Yeah, he has a real keen mind, doesn't he?
Very smart.
Very smart, very experienced, highly educated. And, some people just have really good instincts. Yeah. They have good EQ and they use it and their gut reactions are right. And then some people don't. And that's just kind of a gift. So we all have different gifts. Mm-hmm. But he definitely had that. I saw that in certain instances. And I've seen it with other politicians. Their gut reactions are good. Yeah. So, I mean, we have a lot of great people serving. I'm not saying because somebody's been there a long time, they're not qualified or they're wrong or they're bad. But I do think an injection of new energy in a country that has over 300 million people, some of the most successful people the world has ever known by way of creativity and innovation and execution. And they don't want to run and they won't run for a myriad of reasons, but one of which is they can't beat the high name ID incumbents. Yeah. And let's be honest, Trump won because he was a high name ID. He was a newcomer, but he had huge name ID.
High name ID.
Right. And like Governor Ventura, newcomer, but huge name ID. Governor Schwarzenegger, a newcomer, but huge name ID. So without huge name ID, people are learning. And they're like, it's just really hard to win.
Yeah, it's way hard.
And so then they don't run.
Yeah, and then why put yourself through it?
Yeah, yeah. I'm so glad I did, though. I learned so much, man.
Will you run again, do you think? If for anything?
In my gut, yeah, I do. Yeah. I do think I'll run again. I feel like I want one more non-COVID shot. Yeah. Like I just want a straight up race, like a more traditional race. That was not traditional. Even you can recognize that. And I just want, one more. Yeah. I don't know when it will be. I'm not sure I'll do it. But yeah, I had a great experience sleeping in the back of a Suburban and driving around, waking up for a debate in St. George at 9 a.m. and then being in Logan at 7 p.m. And you got to love gas station food and, you got to love a lot of things that are insane, but it was fun.
What about the Mitt Romney election?
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what Mitt does. There's a lot of people that think he won't run. There's some people that think he will. Mitt's always been straightforward on that. So when he makes a decision, I think he'll let everybody know. If that was an open seat, that is something that I would seriously look at for sure. And I have been looking at it in the event he doesn't. But, it'll be interesting to see what he does.
You wouldn't run against him, though?
Well, we talked about incumbents and name ID.
Yeah, it's
and
hard.
So
he'd be hard to beat. That was my thing with Lee. It's like, man, go down to Spanish Fork, Utah, find an Evan McMullen supporter. You won't find them. You find tons of Mike Lee supporters, right? Yeah. So how's he going to win? I never understood that.
Yeah, and I mean, don't you man, it's hard to say like you have to be strategic and only run if you think you can win, but don't you? Like, don't you at some point have to be strategic? And it's not that I'm against Huntsman or Cox or Mitt. It's just I want an opportunity to serve. You know, it's not that I'm against any one of those three. You know what I mean? Like there are things they have all done that I don't agree with, and there's things they've done that I agree with. And I think they probably know what they are, truthfully, because they're all, you know, friends, people that I know. And that should be the beauty of life, is that we're all different, and we all bring different perspectives and different ideas. So we're different colors, we're different heights, you know, we have different backgrounds. That's the beauty of this country. Right. And we got to embrace that. Like, you don't have to agree with somebody 100% of the time. And I think those three know that I haven't. But, you know, do you want to run against an incumbent that was the Republican nominee for president and can raise as much money as he wants in the snap of you know, a finger, and, you know, has a huge name ID? Like, you know, so.
Although I'd say he's more vulnerable than Lee was, even, which is really interesting. Like, but yeah, they both are really hard to beat.
Yeah. And it'll be interesting to see what happens. I think, you know, he first said he's going to make a decision in the spring, then it was summer, and now it's fall. So I don't know, but he seems like he likes it to me.
Yeah.
I don't know
why. I don't know why he'd keep going. I never know why anyone keeps going.
He brings that business background and experience.
Yeah.
You know.
It's good. It's great. Yeah, it's great for us. I'm just like, what are you doing, man? You have a legacy here.
Some people just have drive. They want to just keep after it. You know what I mean? Keeps them young.
Well,
I don't know.
I hope you do run, man. It seems like you're super passionate about all this stuff and still very much in the mix. So that'd be really cool.
Thanks. I appreciate that, man. I still remember the debate you moderated in the governor's. That was fun. Silicon Slopes. It was good.
That was the biggest debate in Utah history in terms of like live people in the room.
Yeah. How many were in the room?
At least 15,000.
Yeah, because those bright lights were on, and when they're shining in your face, I mean,
you don't know.
You can't see. I mean, I couldn't see anything out there.
Yeah, there's at least 15,000 people in there.
But the cheering and
that was fun.
I wouldn't call it heckling, but just the reactions. Yeah, it was fun. It was a good time.
It's crazy they let me do that.
Why?
It's
You're perfect for that. You're a voice of reason. You're a leader. You understand a lot of the issues. You ask tough questions. I thought your questions were really pointed and very thoughtful and fair across the board to like different candidates.
Yeah.
Right. Like,
interesting.
Like you asked me a really pointed question about my running mate, and that was relevant. And then you asked another different question that wasn't the same.
Yeah.
But it was equally pointed to the others. And I thought you did a great job. Truthfully, I really did.
Well, honestly, the night before I was like, I had like your basic debate questions teed up. Mom, but what do I actually want to ask them?
Right.
And then I just decided I'm just going to ask them what I actually
There's nothing worse than being a candidate. It's like, okay, ask a question and then you just go down, you know, and all, you know, 3 or 4 of you answer, you know, like even for the candidates, it's like, I remember Jim DeBacchus, when he was the Utah Democrat chairman, we spoke to a group of students at the Capitol, and he said to me before we started, hey, I'll give your speech and you give mine. And I said, okay, you go first. Just make sure you'd really do it, you know. So he got up and he started, talking about, it was like my speech. Yeah. Verbatim, because we're in an election year, and it was like we got talking points, you know, in some ways. And the students were just like, what? Like, and then about 3 or 4 minutes, and he's like, just kidding, I was giving, Tom. So you get to a point where you're kind of like, okay, everybody kind of knows what everybody's gonna say, and so asking better questions forces you to give better answers. It's absolutely true. And if you're gonna run for office, any question's fair game. Like, fire away. Like,
again, that's my thing, is like, if you're gonna get in that arena, go all out. What do you have to lose? That sounds like super fun at that point. Yeah. Because you're like freed of the decision of like, am I going to do it or am I not going to do it?
Yeah, you're in the mix.
And now just like, go. Why not?
Yeah. It was an interesting dynamic. There's a lot of candidates on the stage at that point, right? Because it hadn't been narrowed.
Yeah, it hadn't been narrowed at all.
But it was a fun event.
Yeah. Fun.
Well, I want to thank the Silicon Slopes and you. You guys do a lot for the state. I know that the job engine is huge, the economic development, and just more than that, just the great people that are here and that you've brought to the state. And just the overall impact. I mean, the state of Utah is really lucky to have the group, and it's an honor to be here to talk to you about some of these issues.
Oh, thanks, man. Appreciate it. Thanks for coming
all
on.
You do. Yeah, it's good to see you.
Appreciate it.